Hi, I'm Dana, and today we're continuing with sort of remaking some of my older videos because it's been a few years and I have some fresh opinions and I think I'm better at talking and then making these videos now. Didn't prove it with that intro, but there we have it. So today I really want to talk about the grief of late diagnosis again because it's something that I've had more thoughts on since I last made this video. It's something that I've processed more and have moved on from more. You know, I've got a few extra years under my belt. So as much as I have already made a video on this, this isn't a continuation. It'll probably be quite similar in some ways. There'll just be additional points. So you really don't need to go and watch the other video. So getting right into this one, for me, after being diagnosed autistic at 22, I think I was, I felt like it explained so much of my childhood. It felt like, and I mean pretty much my life up to that point, by my childhood kind of thing, you know, my entire life as a young person. Because even though I was late diagnosed, I was still quite young. I suddenly had this much better understanding of just every element of myself up to that point. You know, having done research, I suddenly had this understanding of I wasn't this horrible child that was just a total drama queen and had constant temper tantrums. I was having meltdowns. I'd been bullied my entire school life, everywhere that I went. I moved schools multiple times because of bullying, and it would always continue, and I never knew why. You know, a lot of the time I was bullied for being fat, I'll give, but I was constantly branded fat and weird, and I was like, I'm trying so hard to fit in and I don't understand why these people still think I'm weird. And being diagnosed autistic, I was like, oh, I get it now. And there's 1,000 other examples, but I'm gonna just give you those ones for now because that's not the important bit. So even though I had so much of my childhood explained and it felt like I could understand so much of my life and myself in a much better way, it also brought up a lot of grief and anger to think that I'd been so neglected during my childhood. You know, it's something that I still don't like saying and talking about very much. It makes me a little bit uncomfortable because I spent a very long time pushing no, I had a great childhood. I don't understand why I have all these issues I have. And the more I've actually reflected on my childhood and understood about myself and understood what people need as people, you know, I've realised that I was very much neglected as a child. And I think even if I wasn't autistic, I would have had issues growing up, but especially being an autistic undiagnosed child in that household, in the situation that I was in, I was very neglected. I was not given the support that I required as a person in general, never mind as a young autistic person. And I still feel a lot of grief. I think if anything, I feel more grief about my childhood and more mourning for my childhood now than I did when I was first diagnosed, because I have unpacked a lot of the abuse and neglect that I faced as a child that I did not process or accept in any way when I was first diagnosed. And it's the thing of knowing that you can't get that back, you can't change any of it. I know that that's just how life is and everyone knows it, but you know, fully realising and accepting how many things you needed as a child that you just did not receive, and knowing that you can't ever get that back. You can't go back and receive what you needed, and that is always going to affect me, and that's really fucked up. And that is definitely something I feel a lot of grief and mourning and anger and resentment over. And you know, it takes a lot of working through and unpacking, and I'm definitely still right slap bang in the middle of it and doing a lot to heal my inner child and accept the childhood I had. And it's real fucking tough and it's fucking horrible, and I feel like that's something that a lot of autistic people will feel and experience, even if you had better family situations than I did, because a lot of the other places in the world, school and clubs and general outside of familial relationships, tend to be quite difficult for most of us, you know? And I think especially as children, a lot of us faced very unfair treatment due to our autistic traits. And being able to understand and accept that doesn't change that, I still feel a lot of grief about it. I still feel I'm kind of mourning those years of my life that should have been better than they were and should have set me up better than they did. And I think that also led me into the thought pattern of oh, I've always been like this. And being diagnosed autistic tells you that you will always be like that. There isn't a cure, there isn't treatment. You just are autistic. You just have this different neurotype. Your brain just works differently. And you're just left to cope with that and deal with it after diagnosis, you know? And that's real fucking tough. You know, I'd grown up being told that I had anxiety, that I had depression. I'd been tested for bipolar. There were discussions of if it might be BPD. But it was always stuff that I was led to believe you will be fixed. We will find something to help you. There will be a cure, there will be a treatment, something will happen. We will figure something out that will mean you're fixed. It was very much the impression that I grew up with, you know? I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety as a 12-year-old. So the majority of my life, I was very much given the impression of you'll get better, you'll be like everyone else eventually. We just have to figure out what it is that's making you not like everybody else. And then when they figure it out, they're like, oh yeah, this isn't one that we can change, that there's nothing we can do here, you've just got to deal with it. And that was soul crushing for me. You know, I really, really thought that I would grow out of it, that I would find something to work. And it felt like being told I would never ever get better. And in a lot of ways, I think a lot of this was internalized ableism from having grown up with an autistic brother who was very much just, I can't think of the word, he was just left to do whatever the fuck he wanted and be an absolute arsehole because he's autistic, he can't help it. So I sort of had this idea of like all of the issues that I had at that moment in my life, all of the things that I didn't like about myself, all of the personality flaws that I had, all of like, you know, just nobody's perfect. And I was very, very hyper aware that I was very far from perfect. And I was like, I can't even work on them because it's my autism, it's me being autistic. This is just who I am as a person forever now. You know, and that's definitely not the case. As autistic people, we can still work on ourselves and be better people than we are and learn and be able to be happier, better adjusted people. I don't think that like learning to communicate with neurotypicals makes us better people, but it does make us more well adjusted and more able to get by in society, you know? And I do very much think that the vast majority of us have the ability to learn and improve and do that. But from my like perception and the treatment of autistic people I grew up around, it took me a good while to figure that out, you know? I really was like, oh my god, I'm just going to be damaged and broken forever. When that's not even the case in the first place. I wasn't damaged and broken like because of being autistic. I was damaged and broken because of the way people had treated me as an autistic person. And that was the next thing that really started to play on my mind, which was when I was like more so accepting of like, oh, it's just a different neurotype. My brain just works a little differently. I'm not broken. I'm not, you know, this freak of nature. I am just another person that happens to have a slightly different brain. It's all chill. It was then the realisation of like, this world isn't for me though. As much as I might be able to accept my autistic traits and work around my autistic traits and like myself as an autistic person, the fact of the matter is that the world and the society that we live in is not built for me. You know, it doesn't matter how hard I work on myself, the lights in Asda are always going to be too bright and the little buzzy things on the checkouts are always going to be too loud. You know, I'm never going to like suddenly gain social imagination and not get anxious going into like any social situation ever, because that is my brain. You know, like when I apply for jobs, even if I was well qualified and did have the things required for them, I would still go into the interview and be extremely awkward and find it very difficult to speak and communicate with the person and probably not get the job. The world is very much just not built for me. And I know that you could argue that it's not really built for anyone and there's 1,001 fucking issues going on everywhere right now. But the fact of the matter is it's especially not designed to cater to autistic people. And I'll give that, like, even since I was diagnosed, we have improved, like, and gotten more accommodations that I find helpful. But we are still a light years away from being in a place where autistic people are comfortable just being in society, you know? And that massively sucked for me because, like, I'm a college dropout in the UK. Like, I dropped out at 16 of the thing where you get A-levels before you even go to university. I still have a lot of self-judgment for that. And I've considered going back to education lots and lots and lots of times, and I've had lots of people that tried to encourage me to go back to education because they think I'm a fucking idiot. And it's one of those things where as much as I would like to be more educated, I would like to learn more, I'd like to go back to, you know, I'd have to go to college first and I'd rather just go to uni, to be honest. But it's a case of like, as much as I would like to do that, I can't. You know, having this timetable and having set days where I have to do things and having that change to my routine and having to be around constant lights and sounds and smells and people and all of the, like, I can't do it. It's just way too fucking much. And I would really, really like to. I just fucking can't. Like, schools and academic systems are just not set up for people like me, you know? And that's not to say they're not set up for autistic people. I've known autistic people that have absolutely thrived in academic environments. But for me, it just leads to an absolutely massive burnout where I'm like, I can't get out of bed for the next month, you know? That was why I dropped out of college. I physically couldn't get up to go to college. I was exhausted in every way it was possible to be exhausted with. Because I had the general day that tires out most people, combined with all of the extra sensory difficulties, combined with all the extra anxiety and the extra effort of masking constantly. It's just too fucking much. Like, it's just not built for me. And as much as, like, there's things that I want to do, there's some things that I just know I'm never going to because I'm not the person for it and it's not designed for people like me. Yeah, and when it comes to systems like education, I do think that there needs to be more to cater to people like me. That's one of the few areas where I'm like, you should be catering for every neurotype and everyone should have a space to be able to learn comfortably without reaching burnout and feeling awful, you know? But then there's other things, like I said in the last video I did on this topic, that I really like the idea of van life. I'd love to travel more. I'd love to have that, like, I've pretty much accepted that I'm probably never going to be able to own a property. I'm probably always going to rent, and I don't particularly enjoy that, you know? Ideally, like most people, I would like to own the place that I live. And I love the idea of being able to own a van and be like, this is my home and I can do whatever the fuck I want with it. I can move it wherever I want it to be. It would be ideal. The idea of sleeping just in a van, just outside in a metal little container that people can see and perceive properly, like not a house, absolutely wiles me out. I cannot deal with the idea of that. The idea of like just having to constantly move my home. I would never leave the van anywhere because it might get stolen and then my whole fucking house is gone. You know, there's just 1,001 things that interact with my anxieties and me as an autistic person, my way of life and the need for routine that I have and the way that I perceive like things that just automatically feel right or wrong regardless of how neutral they might actually be. I'm never going to be able to do that. I'm just never going to be the person that fits. And it's fine, I've accepted that. I know that it wouldn't work for me, but that doesn't change that I really fucking wish it would, and I'd really like to do that. Like, for the longest time I really wanted to backpack around Europe, and I'm now at a point where it's like, if I went out and did things 2 days in a row, I would need 3 days of doing nothing. And I don't want to pay for a hostel or a hotel room or whatever to do 2 days of something fun in a place, to have 3 days of rest, to go to the next place, 1 day being used on travel there, to do 1 day in the new place, to have another 3 day, you know, it just wouldn't work. And that's what I would require for it to work. And it's, you know, it'd just be ridiculous. You know, it's one thing to be like, oh, well, you could accommodate to that and just spend the extra money. It's like, yeah, but it would just be ridiculous, wouldn't it? Come on now. But there is still a massive part of me that wants to hike the Appalachian Trail and thinks that I could. Like, I'm still, for some reason, fully convinced that I could, like, hike and camp for months on end. I don't... Like, it's one of those things where I'm like, that sounds ridiculous considering the other things. Like, in comparison to other things, I know it sounds silly, but I'm also like, I just feel like I would really enjoy that and absolutely could do it, you know? But, you know, I can also laugh about it and sit here and be like, I'm just never going to do this thing that I had my heart set on for several years. And I can laugh about it and giggle about it and be like, who isn't that funny? I'm just not the person. Because I've had time to process it and accept it and you know, get really upset about it and cry about it and be like, but I want to be that person. This is a dream of mine. And it's not fair that I won't be able to complete it because of myself. You know, like, it's one thing if it's like you're just too lazy and you're not getting up and doing the work to get the thing you want. It's another thing when it's like, even if I saved up and you know, worked for the thing I want, once I got the thing, I don't think I'd enjoy it. I don't think I'd be happy with it. I think I'd have a meltdown and be like, why did I ever do this? I've just wasted time and money on something that I literally am not built for, you know? I think for me, a lot of like the grief and mourning came from the mixture of like, I just didn't receive things that I needed and things that I deserved to have as a person, combined with the realisation that that's probably going to continue being the case. You know, like, as an adult, you already have to work and implement the things for yourself as a person. I was never the type to have a 5-year plan or who had like my heart absolutely dead set on one career path or whatever. You know, I didn't really have plans. I was never really like set on what I wanted to do. But I also feel like that's because I was part of the generation that had parents that very much pushed like, if you can dream it, you can do it. Reach for your dreams. You can do anything if you believe in yourself. And then I had to have the realisation of like, just because I want to do something, just because I'm like, yeah, I reckon I can do that, does not mean that I can, does not mean that I will, does not mean that it's an available option. And I think that that's something that everybody has to realise at some point. But I think that there's an especially like added layer of realisations and added layer of things that you will not and cannot do when you're autistic, you know? And I think that that's also why part of like the disability rhetoric of like, disabled people can do anything. Disabled people aren't held back by anything if they just try really hard and put their minds to it. And it's like, in the same way that if you get someone that can only use a wheelchair and put them at the bottom of a flight of stairs, they're going to have a fucking hard time getting to the top. If you take an autistic person and put us in situations that our brains can like barely process and keep up with, we're not going to do that well. And there's a lot of pressure from society and life and the internet and, you know, the way that we live as people to do stuff and be exciting and be fun and just constantly be like, out there doing things and I can't. I think there was a lot of like grief to that as well. Like this whole video is about that. But you know, it's the constant realization of like, not only have you missed out on things, but you're going to miss out on things. And even when you don't miss out on things, there's a fucking good chance you're not actually going to enjoy them, or you're just going to be really anxious, or you're going to have a meltdown afterwards. And I'm getting real negative here, and there are lots of things that I can do and will do and really do enjoy. And like, you know, as much as I think it's worth trying things and it's worth putting yourself out there, I also very much do think that disabled people, myself included as an autistic person, have to set boundaries when it's things that just will not work for us, because otherwise we do get pushed into doing things that will not benefit us in any way and maybe straight up negative. And I know that's like a slightly different topic than what we're on, but whenever I've made videos like this, I have people commenting being like, oh, but don't just decide you can't do it. And it's like, no, I could, but it would be fucking horrible, okay? So yeah, that's this video. I post videos on Thursdays and Sundays. If you'd like to see more, you can subscribe, maybe go and watch some older ones if you fancy it. There's going to be new ones on Thursdays and Sundays. And if you want to see any of them earlier, you can subscribe to my Patreon page. I post... Every video goes up before the YouTube one. Sometimes it's like an hour, sometimes it's a couple of days. They're always there early though, okay? And I've been saying it for the longest time, but I am going to start doing like the actual Patreon perks and things. It's gonna be so fucking fab once I do it, I swear, so it's worth getting over there. I also have a Ko-fi if you wanted to donate to that, and you can become a YouTube member. In regards to free things though, because they're the best things, aren't they, you can follow me on TikTok, Instagram and Twitter, and all of that will be linked down in the little bottomy bit below. As always, I would really love to hear any opinions that you have on this, any ways that you feel about it, and just give us your thoughts. I really enjoy the discussion, I really like getting comments. That was a good one. See, even Ali's joining in. If she can comment, you can, can't you? Unless you don't want to, or you get a bit anxious or you feel a bit uncomfortable. There's no pressure, you don't have to. But for now, whoever you are and wherever you are, if you're having a lovely morning, evening, day, afternoon, week, month, year, I will see you again in a couple of days.